Hi friends, Crystal here from Homemaking on the Homestead, and today I am going to discuss modern homemaking, old-fashioned homemaking. Is there a difference? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Basically, I've been a homemaker my entire life. I had a few jobs as a teenager and when I was first married, but they were very short-lived, and the rest of my career as a mom of 8 children, I have been a full-time homemaker. Even when my children were grown and I had finished, I homeschooled all of them all the way through high school, and even when they were grown and all of them out of the house, I still continued to be a stay-at-home wife, homemaker. It was just a choice that my husband and we liked. I like being at home, and I like serving my husband. I like taking care of my house. I like all the things. I like cooking. I like all the things involved in being a homemaker. It gives me purpose and it gives me a lot of joy. When I began my life as a mother and as a wife, there was a lot of pressure from the outside world that I needed to go to school, I needed to get a job, and it was kind of almost a lonely walk in some ways. I didn't know a whole lot of other women at that point that had made that choice. I had my first child when I was very young. I was just a few months out of high school when I had him. And so most of my friends at that point were headed off to college, and they had big careers and dreams and aspirations to do things. And I was at home taking care of a little baby and trying to figure out all the things related to homemaking, which was a lot considering that I had no experience doing this, and I just kind of stepped into it right out of high school. It didn't take me very long to realize that I actually enjoyed it. I was having the time of my life. I enjoyed taking care of my house. I enjoyed taking care of my little baby. I enjoyed cooking and learning to cook and learning all these skills. And yet there was always this pressure in the background that I should be doing something more meaningful with my life. I even had somebody say to me one time years later, well, obviously you didn't have any other choices, so that's why you ended up having to do this. As if it was some sort of punishment. As if it was some sort of, I picked the career of being a homemaker because it was my last resort. And that was not the case at all. If I had decided that I wanted to go off to college and wanted to get a career in something, my husband at that point would have been very supportive of that. And I say at that point because later we made different choices together. So as I continued my daily life as a new homemaker, I looked to the past and looked for examples of homemakers. And of course my grandmother. She was a full-time homemaker her whole entire life. She never worked outside the home, I don't believe, not even a day. And I found great encouragement in that. My grandmother cooked and she cleaned and she sewed and she did all kinds of things and was a very dynamic woman. And I have very fond memories of her. And so I looked at her as an example that, this is okay. People do this. This is an acceptable thing to do as a career choice or just as a life choice. I didn't even really think of it as a career. I thought of it as my life choice that I was making. My mother was also a full-time homemaker up until I think, got into high school, and then she went and got a job and worked for most of her time after that. So I've always held homemaking in high regard, which is obviously something that our culture has not held in high regard. And I always look to all those old-fashioned homemaking skills and homemaking lifestyles, and I kind of clung on to those, as my inspiration and my encouragement to continue to do what I wanted to do in life and to make the choices I was making. And now I am far past that. My oldest son will be 40 this year, and my baby, who I lovingly call that, I'm sure he wouldn't appreciate that, but he just turned 24. And, I still look to old-fashioned homemaking, the skills, the lifestyle, as something that I really do cherish, and I'm thankful for them. So I started seeing things pop up on YouTube, particularly because when you search homemaking things, lots of different things come up. And one of the terms I kept seeing was modern homemaker, modern homemaker. And I'm like, what is a modern homemaker? You know, what is that versus just a homemaker? What is that versus an old-fashioned homemaker, you know? And so I started researching. I watched a few YouTubes of young women. I read a few blogs of women that were, you know, in their either late 20s or in their 30s, and they were using this term modern homemaker, some of them describing what it was. And you know, it was very interesting. I found a lot of good things that actually encouraged me, because at first, you know, you take it as like, well, what's wrong with being an old-fashioned homemaker? But that wasn't what they were trying to imply in that. And what I see in the term modern homemaker is young women who have figured out that homemaking is a wonderful thing. They have found that same joy and that same purpose in their life in being a homemaker. Now, some of these women work outside the home. Some of these women are home full time. But the bottom line for all of them is that they have felt that the home had value, and it had enough value that they wanted to share that and improve society's view, our culture's view on being a homemaker. And to that I say, yes, that's amazing. And it's actually encouraging to me to see a younger generation of women who are embracing homemaking, embracing the value of their home, embracing, you know, raising their children, taking care of their husbands. And I just couldn't be more happy. So now I don't look at the term modern homemaking and take it as some sort of slight against, you know, old-fashioned homemakers. Because in reality, they are sharing and basically preaching the exact same message that we find in what is old-fashioned homemaking. They just wanted to give it a new look and some new encouragement. When I think about old-fashioned homemaking, it reminds me of this book that I just recently bought, Mrs. Beeton's book of household management. This is definitely old-fashioned homemaking. She wrote this book back in the 1800s, mid-1800s, I don't know, I'd have to go look again. But, and I enjoy these kinds of books, again, because, you know, I have that old-fashioned homemaking heart, and so I enjoy these. I shared another one, Mrs. Dunwoody's book, and I've shared some other ones on old-fashioned homemaking, or the old homemaking from years ago. Now, this is a fun read, but I will tell you, I have not read it cover to cover. One of the reasons I haven't read it cover to cover is because a huge section is devoted to cooking. And yes, I love cooking, but, you know, recipes from the 1800s versus recipes today are very different. You get a different perspective when you read these books. I really like the fact that in each section of this book, she goes into great detail. If she's talking about chickens, she will go into a lot of detail about birds and their habitats and their ways of life. And she just has a large appreciation for the value of what she is cooking for dinner that night. We miss that kind of stuff because we're running to the grocery store and grabbing chicken, you know, that's on sale. But that's okay. That's where we are now, right? But the parts of the book that I really did enjoy was at the beginning of the book, because she immediately starts this book by talking about the value of a homemaker. I'm just gonna quickly read a one sentence from the very first page. Basically, the very first sentence she writes. She begins the book by sharing. She shares a lot of scripture verses through the book, so that's good. But this is the very first chapter and the very first paragraph. As with the commander of an army or the leader of any enterprise, so it is with the mistress of a house. She elevates the woman that's running the household to a very high level, the commander of an army, the person in charge of a large business. And I like that she puts homemaking into such a prestigious, recognizable category, because there was a time when homemakers and the work that they did and the value that they brought to the family, to the home, was extremely valued by people. As the book continues in that first chapter, she talks about the ways to conduct yourself and how to put your time and energy and effort into your home. Rise early, get up early and take care of the things that need to be taken care of in the morning before the rest of the household is up. Keep an account book, as she calls it. In other words, be mindful of your finances and be a good steward of them. She talks about the housekeepers and duties of the housekeepers. So in those days, there was so much work because everything was done by hand and from, the bottom up, that you did hire help if you were able to afford that. Today, we have so many conveniences in our life that they basically are our housekeepers. We don't need a housekeeper because we have vacuums, we have washing machines, we have KitchenAid mixers, we have all kinds of things that help us every day to do our job as a homemaker. And she talks about the kitchen and its value because so much of life revolves around the kitchen. If you cook from scratch, then you know what I'm talking about. So I think the term modern homemaking is kind of more of a revival of homemaking and taking into account even more resources and things that are available today for young homemakers than were in my time. But whatever homemaking looks like to each individual woman is really their choice, and whatever gives them that joy and whatever gives them that purpose, I am all for that. And like I said to begin with, it doesn't matter if a woman works outside the home or she's home full-time. That isn't the definition of a homemaker in my mind. In my mind, a homemaker is somebody, well, number one, who has a home. If you have a home, you are automatically a homemaker. But a homemaker at heart is somebody that values that home and values the activities that go on there and values, the keeping the home clean, putting those meals on the table, bake some bread, utilizing some of those old-fashioned homemaking skills in all the work that they do to incorporate a beautiful life at home. All right, you guys, that is my little talk on modern homemaking versus old-fashioned homemaking. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any thoughts about that or your own opinions on it, as always, I would love to hear them. I enjoy conversing with each of you and knowing that we have such a great little community here starting up. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate all of you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.